Now for this demonstration I thought we'd give ourselves a bit of a challenge. This image was taken during the storms of 2014 January, and it was taken from a mile away through a hurricane with a 400mm lens at 3200 ISO, and the result is a fairly murky affair. But when you look at what's going on within the image, hopefully, because it's a raw file, we can bring back sufficient information as to make this a presentable image. I'm also going to take the opportunity of showing you a thing called snapshots within Adobe Camera Raw. We'll use the tone curve and some radical noise reduction, as well as some pretty radical basic processing. So here we go. I'll left select the image, Control R. The workflow options are set to ProPhoto RGB 16 bits per channel, and that's mainly for when we send it to Photoshop at the end, but I've made sure that they are correctly set at the beginning. First of all, let's just have a look at this thing called snapshots, and if the very right hand part of the panel, we've got snapshots, so select that. So the idea is we can carry out a load of processes to our image and save the process as a snapshot. All you need to do is go down to there, new snapshot, give it a name, and it will save the current process settings. You can then reprocess the image and resave it as a preset, give it a different name. And then you can select between the presets and view the different ways you've processed the image. So this one here, no adjustments, I saved that as a preset before any adjustments were made. I then processed the image in the basic panel and saved it as a thing called processed, and you can see the effect I had there, and that included the tone curve as well, and you can see all the different adjustments I made to there. If we go to the tone curve, what I did to the tone curve, go back to the presets, snapshot, sorry, and processed and detail. So that was the basic, the tone curve, and the detail panel now. So these are the sharpening and noise reduction settings I applied. Back to the snapshots, and then I added a slight brush adjustment to the flying spray here. So that was the kind of final effect. Okay, so each stage of the process I saved a snapshot purely for demonstration purposes, but you can see that I could have converted this to, say, a black and white. In fact, let's do that. Let's go to the hue, saturation, luminance, convert to grayscale. Probably not going to have much effect with some of these sliders because there's so little tonal color information. We can now go back to snapshots, save that, just drag that in and call that B&W, black and white. And now we can go back to our processed and detail and brush. So there's a color version and there's a black and white version. Okay, so I'm going to go back to no adjustments and we'll start the process in here. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is correct the color. We could try, that's the basic panel, we could try auto because the ash shot didn't work, and Camera Raw hasn't got enough information to color information to correctly render this. So we need to go to our white balance tool. Okay, so we need to select an area that I know should be a kind of white. So maybe go to the top of the lighthouse there. Now that's given us a regional rendition, but I found that it probably needs to be around about 29,000 degrees Kelvin to give us a fairly neutral colouring. So that's the colouring set reset to neutral. But looking at the histogram, we can see that there's no information to the left, the shadow areas, and there's no information from the midtones all the way through to the highlights. So it's a very compressed and thus a muddy sort of image. So this is the ideal time to use the tone curve. And we're going to use the point version of the tone curve. And the idea is we've got the histogram represented within the tone curve. So in order to stretch here, left and right, we need to drag this tone curve line, grab the node and drag it to the beginning of the represented tone curve there. We can also do the same to the one on the right, the top right. Don't drag it down, keep it towards the top or right at the top and drag that to the beginning of the highlight information. And we can see how the tone curve has been stretched in the top. We can now go back to the basic panel. And it took a long time to get the right settings here. So rather than go through and tweak all these, I'm just going to go to the snapshot and apply the processing to the basic panel. So those are the settings that I found were pretty correct for this particular image. We then need to go to the detail panel, and in here we can set the amount of sharpening and noise reduction. So with an image like this, there's going to be an awful lot of noise because we've expanded a very limited tonal range into something that encompasses the full range of tones, and it emphasizes any noise in it. So let's look at the noise reduction for a start before we apply any pre-sharpening. So the color is also, it's got an automatic default setting. If I drag that from the 25, we can see there's an awful lot of color noise as well as luminance noise. Just double click on the color to bring it back to the default setting. There's still some color information, color noise there, so I'm going to drag that maybe to about 60 or so, something like that, and drag the smoothness slider that way as well. So we tend to be left with what's called luminance noise. This is the sort of grainy effect that you can see there. Now I'm going to try and apply as much sharpening as I can, but I rarely go above the 40 amount of noise reduction. And I'll leave the details and the contrast sliders as is. But you can see the difference between what we had and what we got now. Okay, we can now apply some sharpening, and this is pre-sharpening, so I'm going to apply my usual about 40, leave the radius and the detail as set, and press the Alt key and we'll apply some masking so that the sharpening is only applied to those areas with some detail within them. So I'll leave that roundabout there. Control 0 to bring it back to there. So we've done some fairly radical adjustments to this image. What I'd like to do now is just add a little bit more punch to this spray here. Now the adjustments that I've just made probably aren't quite correct, so I'm just going to go back to the snapshots, and I'm going to click in the processed and detail just to bring it back to as I originally intended it. Okay, so it's given us the basic panel. That's how I adjusted the tone curve, and that's how I adjusted the sharpening and noise reduction, just in case I ain't got it quite right there. Okay, so I now need to create a brush and just bring in a little bit more punch into this huge spume of wave. So we go to the adjustment brush, and I've already selected the adjustments I wish to apply to this brush. Okay. And I'm just going to draw in around something like that, not too much. Okay. And there we have it. We've now gone and changed what was potentially a unusable image into something that we could enter into competition, hopefully. So hopefully that's given you another overview and a few more ideas as to the potential that we've got with using raw files in Adobe Camera Raw, even with images that look almost impossible to use in the first place.